For more on the foreign ministers' CICA minister meeting, we are joined in our Beijing studio by Mr. Teng Jianqun, who is director of the Center for Arms Control at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir, to our program. Meanwhile, joining us from Tehran, we're having Professor Mohammed Marandi, professor and also dean of the World Faculty Studies at the University of Tehran. Welcome, sir. Meanwhile, joining us from Moscow, we're having Mr. Dmitri Trenin, who is the director of the Carnegie Moscow Center. He also been with the center since its inception and chairs the Research Council and the Foreign and Security Policy Program. Welcome as well, Mr. Trenin. So, gentlemen, we understand the three countries that you are originally at least coming from are in fact the members of CICA, China, Iran, and also Russia. But at this moment, during this conference of the foreign ministers, we see some really urgent issues, not necessarily only about the organization's development, but really what's going on right now in Asia. DPRK is the one attract everybody's attention. On the day of the CICA ministerial conference, the news came out. Another Musudan missile was launched, even though it failed, according to international observers. But Mr. Teng, how urgent really is the situation on the Korean Peninsula? We understand there's a party congress coming over.
Yeah, I think the CICA's conference at this moment is very crucial for the countries concerned to discuss the issues like DPRK. And after the 2270 resolution adopted by the UN Security Council, the situation in Korean Peninsula has been in a very serious condition. I think the two sides, I mean DPRK and the United States, continue their effort to increase to intensify the tension in that region. I think this is actually a real threat for the security and the peace and stability of Asia continent. So
we heard the Chinese minister talking about this at the press conference. We also heard at the speech given by the Chinese President Xi Jinping, he talking about, here's the exact quote, absolutely not permit war or chaos on the Korean Peninsula as Korea's neighbors. But what can China do, really?
Actually, China contributed greatly for the denuclearization in DPRK and also in ROK deployed by the United States, the nuclear weapons. So I think this time China's cooperation with the other countries in UN Security Council and also in the regional countries, I think is of great importance for the future to maintain the momentum to curb the nuclear and the missile capability in DPRK.
And of course, among the CICA members, there's Russia, who is a UN Security Council P5, as they say, permanent 5. And also, Russia has been on the six-party talks, dealing with DPRK as well on different fronts. Mr. Trenin, how much role can Russia play in this regard if we all identify it as a big threat?
Well, Russia is a close neighbor of Korea. It shares a border with Korea, just like China does. If something happens on the Korean Peninsula, a military conflict, a test that has gone awry, or some incident, Russia would feel the result of that. So Russia has a very high stake, I would say as much as China, in seeing to it that the Korean Peninsula does not become a battlefield of a new war or does not become an area of another disaster on the scale of Chernobyl or worse. So Russia is both a member of the currently suspended talks on the Korean nuclear issue. Russia is a country that maintains relations with both Pyongyang and Seoul. Russia has a close partnership relationship with China, and Russia shares a fairly serious interest in stemming proliferation of and reversing proliferation of nuclear weapons with the United States.
All right.
So Russia has a very significant role to play in the situation on the nuclear issue of the Korean Peninsula.
Very interesting, sir. You describe Russia's role in so many different ways. But let me ask you, because at this year's CICA meeting, there has been specific results in the declaration, 2 sentences in the declaration: fully implementation of the UN Security Council resolution on the Korean Peninsula nuclear crisis issue. And the other thing is strengthen cooperation among member countries of CICA on this front as well. But many wonder whether Russia was or is going to have any kinds of cooperation, military or technological wise, with DPRK. From your perspective?
Well, Russia stopped being a military ally of North Korea at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union. The new Russia immediately redefined its former relationship with the DPRK. Russia has a political relationship with North Korea. It has an economic relationship much smaller than, for example, China has, but it certainly keeps channels of communication to the north open. Now, Russia wants to use whatever influence it has to impress the North Korean leadership that its actions are reckless and dangerous, that those actions will not lead to any good results for North Korea, that those results leave North Korea essentially friendless in the world, and that those actions need to stop. On the other hand, if North Korea were to adopt a different kind of policy, and Russia was in the past proposing ideas such as a trans-Korean pipeline, a trans-Korean railroad.
Right.
In case North Korea accepted those proposals, situation on the Korean Peninsula would have been so much better, would have been improved, and North Korea would be able to profit not by blackmailing others, but by transiting goods and transiting passengers to common benefit.
Very interesting. We've already got 2 perspectives coming from China, coming from Russia. Both, of course, are members of CICA. Another member of CICA is Iran. We have Professor Marandi with us. Professor, we've been talking about Iran's nuclear issue for a long time with you on many occasions. But of course, an agreement was reached, P5+1, with Iran. And I was talking to your first Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vice Minister Mr. Marandi, and he was telling me that maybe inspirations could be drawn for the resolution of the DPRK nuclear issue, let's just say coming from the Iran nuclear issue and its way to resolve it. Of course, there are many differences, but Professor Marandi, from your perspective, what can be learned and what can be shared?
Well, I would say that it is very different, as you pointed out, because in the case of Iran, the country has always been developing its nuclear program within the framework of international law. And the Iranian peaceful nuclear program, in the opinion of Tehran, was used as an excuse to put pressure on the country by the United States because Iran did not abide by American policy in the region, such as in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and so on with regards to Palestine. Nevertheless, despite the enormous differences, what the Iranians have proposed is for concession of flexibility on all sides. And I think the Iranians did show a significant amount of flexibility, even though there were complaints at home that maybe Iran had gone too far. But Iran went the extra mile to show that it was not the side that was causing the trouble. In the case of the Korean Peninsula, I think it's far more complicated, because on the one hand, as your previous guest rightly pointed out, the behavior of the North Korean government has been erratic and unconstructive. But on the other hand, the United States has not shown any willingness to improve the situation. In fact, I think one of the benefits of the Chinese and the Russian policy is that they've been trying to manage the situation. China, for example, and Russia both have very good relations with South Korea, but they also have relations with North Korea. The United States, on the other hand, I think, has an interest in keeping the conflict between the two Koreans as it is, because that will legitimize their presence in South Korea.
Yes, indeed.
Again, I don't want to exaggerate, but it's not completely unlike what we see in the South China Sea, where it is in the interest of the United States to create difficulties between China and its neighbors in order to justify its presence there.
Well, there are different interpretations as to why countries do things this way or that way, even on this very specific issue. Let me come back to the three of you about what exactly can CICA play in this regard, because there's a UN Security Council, there is also the kinds of six-party talks, even though it's been suspended so far, but there has been various kinds of a G20 foreign minister meeting, a G7 as well, all talking about this. So what can an organization like CICA, pretty young, I have to say, Mr. Teng, and also really coming from Asian countries, from very different walks of life, and also Eurasian countries such as Russia, what can be done about this? What can be the role of another layer of organization like CICA?
Yeah, CICA was established immediately after the end of Cold War, and all the member states now, 26 member states, 9 observers, and 4 international organizations. I think this is a very specific targeted at the regional affairs, not only the security in Asia, but also the development and the effort to promote the peace and the stability in this region. You mentioned just now the diversity of the region, for example, different regions, religions, and also different cultures, different peoples. Of course, they should have an inclusive approach to each other. This is actually a diversified continent, and which will give you a different development, and also give you a different benefit for the country, for the peoples. So I think if we have a look at the continent, of course, we should have such a significant and specific mechanism to deal with the regional issues, affairs.
Right. And of course, when it comes to regional issues, such as controversial as the DPRK nuclear issue, this mechanism seems to be quite interesting and useful in bringing everybody online in a way to face the same challenge. Talking about CICA, China has held the presidency of CICA since the year 2014. During the past 2 years, the nation has been making a lot of efforts to implement the mechanism. Take a look at this. Last May, the first annual conference of CICA non-governmental forum was held. In August, we saw the first conference of CICA Youth Council. In early October, a series of activities were seen on CICA Day. In November, there was the first conference of CICA Business Council, and then this April, the Dialogue of Asian Civilization held in Boao Forum in Hainan. All of this related to CICA, but what can be the role of CICA is still a big question mark, Mr. Trenin, because we have already quite a number of competing or cooperative, if we want to use that adjective, mechanism already existing in Asia and beyond Asia.
Well, they may be competing, but they're also complementary. I think that CICA has an advantage of being a very wide forum. It includes 26 nations of the Asian continent, and this is one of the widest groupings in that part of the world. It's not an alliance, it's not a bloc, it's not an economic union, but it's a forum. It's a forum where people from different parts of Asia come and discuss things that matter to them all. And this creates, I think, a culture in Asia of discussing jointly, multilaterally, the issues pertaining to security and other important areas common to all the continent. I think what CICA does is essentially build a society, an international society in Asia. And that, I think, is a very useful initiative. There are other organizations, you're right. There is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. There are other organizations and some members of CICA are also members of the G20, etc. But CICA is important as a very wide forum to discuss issues of interaction, of cooperation, and that, I think, contributes, as I said, to the evolution and the emergence, eventually, of an Asian international society.
Right. Professor Marandi, we've seen Asian countries over the years quite eager as its economy rises to seek for an identity. Of course, at this moment, it's quite complex because we got territorial disputes, we got the DPRK nuclear crisis, but putting all of these things aside, this region, including the Middle East and Eurasian countries, have to move forward. Will a forum like this really be of much help, particularly a forum in which China is holding the presidency? We certainly have noticed, Professor Marandi, before you answered the question, that there is a difference between APEC, for example, which is Asia Pacific, across the Pacific countries, this time CICA, which is mainly Middle East, Eurasian, and Asian countries ourselves.
I think it's very important.
As I said, it's complementary.
Yes, yes, indeed. Professor Marandi, if you can.
There's somebody else, right?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay, absolutely.
Yes, I agreed. I agree with what your previous guest was saying, and I think that the organization itself comes at a very important moment. And that is, as the world is changing and the balance of power, economic power, is moving away from North America and Western Europe. And until now, much of the fate of the world, politically speaking, has been determined by Western countries. And we are moving away from a Eurocentric world. And therefore, a forum like this, in addition to economic organizations such as the AIIB, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, all of these complement one another, and they allow Asian countries to move closer towards one another and to gain better understanding, because traditionally our understanding of one another has come from the West, from Western think tanks, from Western texts for university students, but now this opens a greater opportunity for greater understanding, and also importantly, greater cooperation. For example, the situation in Afghanistan, which is of great concern to Iran, to India, to Central Asia, to China, to Russia, can be discussed in such forums. We have the rise of the drug trade. We have the rise of ISIL in Afghanistan, which is becoming potentially a threat to Central Asia. These are all issues that need to be discussed in such broad forums, and we need more local cooperation rather than Western cooperation to deal with these issues.
Dr. Teng, before we go, it's very interesting, Professor Marandi, talking about we need to see each other into the eyes directly rather than through a third person or a third party. Which brings us to the end of the question, which is, we see this time CICA in the declaration talking about, drug trafficking, anti-drug trafficking. It's also talking about encouraging small and medium-sized enterprises. All of these are very different agendas from one another, but under one umbrella of anti-terrorism. Do you see CICA will be a pillar in terms of fighting terrorism in the future?
Of course, as Dmitri just mentioned, this is a very important forum, not an airline or not a bloc. So I think the situation in Asia continent also suffering the terrorist challenges. So I think such a security forum should contribute greatly to the anti-terrorist effort by the countries concerned in this region.